Back here now on the show to continue on with another topic we have on here about the topics to watch now in mandatory minicamp as that gets more underway this week. What is there to look for? What can we anticipate with some more developments, maybe some more chemistry being built now? Not the longest of periods in the off season. It's only about 3 days that these teams have it for, but this is the last thing that will happen in the offseason before there will be a break, and then we get into training camp, and then rolling into preseason, and then before you know it, the NFL is underway. But for those 10 teams that started mandatory mini camp this week, I sort of put a list together of what I'm looking for, some of the interesting topics to look at as that gets underway. So without further ado, the first team that started mandatory mini camps this week was the Chicago Bears, and really how Caleb Williams just continues to grow more and more in this offense. There were stories, some rumors about him struggling last week at OTAs. Not everybody had to be there now at mandatory minicamp. Obviously, it is a requirement for these players to be there. You have more of that offense being filled out. How does that help Caleb Williams in his process? He has been doing very well so far, but other than those struggles, that has been the latest doubt around him. But how he continues to build that chemistry with Keenan Allen, that's also there. Roma Dunze coming back again from that little injury that he had, having that continual success with that offense, getting those reps in more and more as it gets more closer to the real thing, closer to pads, I think will be huge for the Chicago Bears, obviously, to have Caleb Williams heading into training camp in the best situation possible and feeling the most comfortable as the season goes along. That's the biggest thing for the Chicago Bears. And then moving on to the second team, the Cowboys, they also started mandatory minicamp. Was reported some doubts about CeeDee Lamb maybe showing up. He has to be there, but at the end of the day, he was not there. He was still absent so far through this week, not at mandatory minicamp. But on the bright side, the Cowboys do get Micah Parsons back, and he sort of went into why he was away, why he didn't show up to the voluntary portion of the offseason just to get healthy and get right. But CeeDee Lamb, by not being there, it will cost them a good amount of money. I forget exactly what the fine is, but he will be getting fined for each day that he is not there. So he is still holding out for a contract. How does he return? In what shape he comes back? What does he have to say? If he does show up to training camp without a deal, I don't anticipate that happening, but how does that whole dynamic work with the team and that relationship? Michael Parsons came back and he didn't have any ill feelings or anything. He just was trying to get healthy, doing his own thing in the offseason like he typically does, but that is something to monitor if we see any progression as the offseason goes along with these contract negotiations with the Dallas Cowboys. But that's the second one. At number 3, the Lions. It was mentioned before how they're looking to evolve Jahmyr Gibbs' game a bit more, specifically in the passing game. And I thought that was very interesting just because the wide receiver depth that the Lions have wasn't the best, I would say, in the NFC North, other than Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Jameson Williams, I guess, but he really hasn't grown into the player that I believe he can be as of yet. Now having Jahmyr Gibbs explore that area a bit more, I think is very, smart to do it because he is very dynamic out of the backfield, how quick he is. And if he could just, learn some leverages, learn all these small intricacies of maybe working out of the slot and running some specific routes, I think he would be very successful as a wide receiver. And to use him as that Swiss Army knife, almost like Deebo Samuel is used with the San Francisco 49ers. No, I'm not saying that they're compatible at this moment based on talent and everything. I would probably think most people would take Deebo Samuel, as would I, at this point, but similar role that I think the Lions will try to use Jahmyr Gibbs at in their offense, and I like it. I want to see how that develops more and more in this Lions offense. If they could do that, make this offense even more dynamic than it was last year, you have a great chance of making it back to the conference championship in 2024. Then, as we move on, the next topic, the Houston Texans, how do they just incorporate all of these new weapons into their offense, other than getting back Tank Dell and seeing how he's looking after his injury and that unfortunate incident that happened down in Florida? How is he looking? Obviously, Stephon Diggs in a new team, presumably one of the main targets for CJ Stroud. All these guys could be number one targets, so just an excess of riches there down in Houston. How does CJ Stroud also develop and build more into that leadership role and incorporating all the receiving options that he has, but also Joe Mixon there out of the backfield. They're already being touted as Super Bowl contenders, AFC Championship contenders. So how quickly they, gel together and know the playbook and really build chemistry with C.J. Stroud, it'll just bring better results for them as the season kicks off in September. Then the next team I wanted to talk about is the Indianapolis Colts. Really, the biggest thing is Anthony Richardson's health. Where's he at in his rehab from that shoulder surgery that he had, and also the young talent that they also have on offense. You see A.D. Mitchell there on your screen. He has been very impressive so far through OTAs and rookie minicamp and whatnot. How does he get incorporated into this offense more and more? And how really a big of a contribution he can make right away, because I think this offense could be very exciting with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor back there running the game, managing, controlling the pace of play with the running attack. And then you had a dynamic weapon like A.D. Mitchell, along with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs as well in his anticipated second year in the NFL. They have some weapons on this Colts team, but just how they sort of mature and evolve into a bigger responsibility with some of these young talents quicker, I think would go a long way. And how does Anthony Richardson look after missing a lot, mostly all of his first year? Those are really the biggest things as the offseason goes along for the Colts. And then you have the Miami Dolphins. Really, at this point, I forgot to change the title there, but the Miami Dolphins was speculated that Tua could miss the this mandatory part, working out his contract, but he is still there. He is present at the mandatory part of this. So, oddly enough, very interesting look from Tua. I was very surprised here. Not to side note too much, but very interesting look there for Tua. Letting his hair out, shaving the beard, looks very different, completely different than what he did a few months ago. But that's really a topic to follow. His new physique, how quicker and how much better that makes him at evading tackles, evading getting hit because of the concussion situations that he had and struggling with that. He wants to stay healthy, so obviously making it harder for the opposing defense to tackle him will be one of the things to watch, and how much more dynamic that makes him out there on the field, but also how those contract negotiations develop as we move closer and closer to training camp. And maybe if he shows up to this mandatory part of the offseason and still gets no contract by the time training camp starts, maybe he decides to not go to training camp and take on the fines, but it does put a lot more pressure on the Dolphins to get that deal done. And then moving on to one of the last teams I have, the Minnesota Vikings. Again, seeing how J.J. McCarthy develops has been impressing people as well in the local media there in Minnesota. Now that connection with Justin Jefferson, now that you've locked him up for a long time, how do those two gel, and how quickly does that help out J.J. McCarthy? And having a guy out there like Justin Jefferson, how much better does that make him look, and how much more confident that does make him out there? That was one thing that Justin Jefferson wanted to emphasize with JJ, and having a guy out there like Justin Jefferson, how helpful that is for JJ McCarthy. I can't really put it into words how much that is of a help for young quarterbacks, but how that chemistry and that relationship develops will be something to watch at this point in the offseason. Then we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Two new coordinators, two real new changes of identity now with the Philadelphia Eagles in Kellen Mond there on your right and Vic Fangio there on your left. How they incorporate their ideas and how much better do the Eagles look in 2024 than they did in the tail end of the year in 2023, I think will be a massive thing. You get two guys there that are more established and have more of a reputation compared to the coordinators that they had in their last year. Too much mixing and moving these guys in and out of different roles within the team. So now hopefully they find a little bit more stability because they have the talent to do it. Now they just need to line their ducks all in order. If they could do that, it's hard to find a flaw in this team, honestly, with all the talent that they have. But hopefully they get it more in order, and it looks a little bit more organized in 2024 with how these new coordinators implement their new ideas. And then you have the 49ers, some more coordinator talks. Brandon Staley and Nick Sorensen's involvement in the defensive side of the ball. Brandon Staley obviously an expert in the defensive side of the ball, but he isn't the defensive coordinator. He's actually the assistant head coach. How much is he involved in the defense? Maybe overdoing it. Maybe I dare to say over Nick Sorensen, who is technically the defensive coordinator but doesn't have as much experience as Brandon Staley. How do they manage that relationship and that dynamic on who calls the plays, who talks to the players, who organizes all the schemes and everything like that? How that sort of relationship develops will be something to monitor, because you don't want to tinker too much with an established team already. And if you get two voices in your head now trying to relay a play to you, it could get sloppy, and that's the last thing the 49ers want on their road to finally trying to get a Super Bowl. Then the final team I have on here, similarly to JJ, how Will Levis develops in this new offense, a completely different offense than what he had last year with Mike Vrabel. Now in his second year, already having to learn another offense, how does that maybe slow his development, or how much better does that make him, having been more exposed to different schemes and everything like that? How quickly he picks up on it and takes advantage of it, because he has the weapons to do it in Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyler Boyd. He really is the piece that drives all of that together. So how he fits into that role and learns the new offense will be something huge to watch out for in 2024. But that's pretty much it. All 10 teams and what to look out for as they continue on through mandatory minicamp. But for right now, that'll do it for that segment. And when we return, we have one more topic to discuss: the quarterback situation between the Steelers and the Browns. Who comes out on top, and which situation would you rather have if you were a fan of either of these teams? Phil Simms has a side that he is pretty adamant about, and I would probably tend to agree with him. Find out what side I stick on in that discussion after we return from this break in a few seconds.